All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March edition of the Rotary E-Club of Southeast USA and Caribbean Zoom meeting. Of course, I'm A.Bostdorff-Miller, Club President. We've got a really good meeting this evening. We've got, I'm sure, a wonderful speaker. It's our newest club member, Dave Nichols, who goes by Disasterdave. And yeah, he's on with us. I'm actually going to go ahead and directly turn the meeting over to PDG Will Miller to do the introductions.
Okay, thank you, President Alicia. Good to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time in the other room.
It's been 3 weeks.
So, yeah,
I just got home last night, so there you go.
Yeah, actually, I haven't seen her for a long time. So she was up in Ohio for quite some time. So Dave Nichols, AKA Disaster Dave, has been in Rotary for almost 10 years. He was past president of the West Seattle Rotary Club, and he's also a volunteer response team member of ShelterBox. He's deployed 8 times for various natural disasters, once in the US and 7 times internationally. And he's also deployed to Haiti. He's represented ShelterBox at 2 international conventions in Korea and Atlanta. He served 20 years in the US Army, doing all kinds of things, including communications and security and crypto and things that he said he'd have to kill me if he told me about them. So he's also a disaster director for the Seattle Red Cross with 5 deployments on presidentially declared disasters. He retired from Public Health Seattle in King County, where he was emergency manager. And he now is living the good life in Boquete, Panama, with his wife, Bridget. He does volunteer work with the Los Niños Cat Sanctuary. Is that big cats? Big cats.
No, kitty cats.
Kitty cats, small cats.
Kitty cats,
Okay.
small cats. Yeah.
Well, any cat in a pinch, you know. Yeah. He also works with Boquete Health and Hospice. So I'm going to turn things over to Disaster Dave, and we really appreciate you being with us and being here tonight to talk with us about ShelterBox and other things.
Thanks, Will. So I'm got about 20 slides, so I'm gonna go through them kind of quick. If you have questions about anything in particular, speak up. If not, I'll answer questions when we get done. So I really want to tell you who I am because Will did, but part of my job with ShelterBox beyond the field work is really to tell our story, because who better to talk about what we do in the field than the people who are in the field. So I'm gonna talk quite a bit about that. Why do we do what we do? Because right now 113 million people and counting are displaced by natural disasters or conflict. Even before Ukraine, more than any time since World War II have there been that many people displaced. And somebody's got to help those people. And so that's part of what we do. But this is part of the reason that we do this. I mean, because natural disasters happen to people. This is what happens mostly in not the Caribbean region, but in the equatorial region, which is where most of our disasters are, because of hurricanes and typhoons that hit these places. What is ShelterBox? We're an international Rotary project partner. What that means is we have a memorandum of understanding with Rotary International that we are their partner for disasters. So that means we work together, and I'll talk about how that works out also. And we're a British charity. You can tell by my accent that I'm British. 20 affiliate countries. So the US has an affiliate, France, Germany, Australia, New Zealand. I can't remember all of them. And basically what the affiliates do is they manage the volunteers that go out and tell the story. So within the US structure, there's the response team members like myself, and there are ambassadors. Ambassadors go to clubs, organizations, the Rotary Convention, and tell the story. We ShelterBox, have deployed more than 230 times in 100 countries since 2001. You can do the math and figure out we've been to some of those countries more than once. We've been to Haiti about 6 times. We've been to the Philippines so many times we set up an office in Haiti, or I'm sorry, in the Philippines, because we go there a lot. We've sheltered over 1.5 million people. And this is delivered by a specially trained team of 2 to 3 people. And right now there are only 50 of us in the world that are trained to do this stuff, and we're all volunteers. We only have 2 things in common. One, we really believe in what we're doing and we take the time to help people. And 2, we all speak English, except for the Brits. So how's it work? So we're a nonprofit. It's called a charity in England. And we raise all the time for Haiti, whatever the next Haiti size event is. We don't wait. A lot of agencies go into a disaster. They do a brief, and then they go raise money for it. And we don't do that. We're always raising money for the next event. When the last event happened in Haiti, we already had stuff ready to go. So we don't have to do that. We don't allow dedicated funding, except for Syria is the only place where we use dedicated funds, because when you use dedicated funds or government money, it's specific to an area. And often, as I say, we're raising money all the time. So by the time we get done with that area and raise the money, we've gone on to the next disaster. When the last Nepal happened, 6, 7 years ago, I had 14 clubs in the Seattle area that wanted to give money. And when I showed up to tell them what we were doing over there, a couple of the clubs wanted to be guaranteed that the money would go straight there. And I explained that that wasn't going to happen because we already had kit in the air to Nepal. So we're always raising for the next big thing. So where do we respond? If we're asked in, somebody has to ask us to come in. We don't just barge into somebody's country and say, we're here to help. If that country has no safety net, which is a lot of the countries that we go to, or in the case of Japan, their safety net's broken. It just too much. They had too many things happen during the typhoon. During the earthquake and the tsunami and the meltdown. Too many things broken in their safety system, so we had to go in and help them. My mover's not moving. There we go. So what is a response team member? So we're a bunch of stuff. We're logistics specialists. We have to bring stuff into the countries we're going to. When I was in Haiti in October, we brought in kit from Panama because we have a warehouse here in Panama. We're caseworkers. We go out and do an assessment and work with the local response people to figure out who really needs the help. And then we document that because we have to report back to our donors, you guys, what we did with the money that you donated. We're really, really careful about that. We're diplomats. Often, as a team of 2 or 3, we're the highest ranking people in our organization in that country. And we've met presidents, generals, all sorts of things. So we have to be diplomatic about the work we do. And we're an ambassador. You know, we're always singing the praises of ShelterBox, whether we're in the field or on a Zoom meeting. So how do you become a response team member? So ShelterBox UK, which is our ops section, when they post for it, they get about 2,000 resumes. Once they screen the resumes, it goes down to about 800. They look for skills. If you've worked overseas before, if you have a passport, it's really important to have a passport. They do some online testings, logistics type testing with Excel spreadsheets, a questionnaire, which talks about time commitments. They require 2-3 week deployment, ability to deploy twice for 3 weeks every year. So that cuts people down about 200. They have a 4-day course on multiple continents. In the US, we do it in Texas. And we start with about 16 to 20 people, end up with 2 to 4, maybe 5. It's hot in Texas. And what they really do is just put us under a lot of stress to see how we handle stress and make sure we're, got the right thing going. If you're selected at your 4-day course, you go to England in Cornwall for the 10-day course, where they teach you everything, hopefully, that you need to know. We usually graduate with a class of 16 to 17 people. And then you're on probation for your first deployment, because you can only fake it so much in training. And some people get out in the field and find that it's not for them. It happens every once in a while, but they're pretty good about getting the right people. So as you can see, we start with a really big number and end up with a really small number, because we want to make sure that we've got the right people. Because when there's 2 of you and you're in a country where you don't speak the language and you've never been there before, you need to be able to function to get the job done. What sets us apart from other agencies, other than we're small, we're autonomous, nimble, and timely. Autonomous is once we're trained, and this is 2 teams. This isn't Haiti. My first trip to Haiti is 16. And so this is 2 teams. We're trading off, handing off. You can't see my feet, but I have sandals on because I'm not going back to the field. I'm getting on a plane. So we're autonomous. So once they train us, they trust us. A team of 2 can call in 1,000, up to 1,000 shelter boxes just on our say-so, because they trust us. They trust us with money. We each have a credit card. And when we say we're going to deploy, they put 5,000 pounds on it. We make decisions in the field. We talk to our ops people. We bounce things off of them, but we make the final decision because they know we're the ones in the field. We're nimble. We have an online calendar. And once your name's on that calendar, if they call and you deploy, they expect you to be gone within 24 to 48 hours. And we're timely. We're only on the ground for 3 weeks at a time. And then another team comes in like this picture. So we want to get stuff done every day. Our day off is the day before we leave, so we can go to a nice hotel and shower, so they'll let us on the plane. But we work every day of the week while we're there to help people, because they're living in the streets, waiting on somebody to help them. So we want to make sure we can do that. So our teams typically, and I'm saying typically because during COVID, we didn't go anywhere. The Haiti trip that I was on in August, September was our first deployment since COVID. But typically we're out every 2 to 3 weeks, and we typically have 2 to 3 teams in the field in different countries. And as I said, we're out for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. Some of our larger events, the first Haiti in 2010, we put up almost 30,000 tents on the island. Japan was 16. Yolanda, which was my first international deployment, we put up 7,000 tents on 4 islands. Lebanon, Syria is part of the Syrian crisis, and that's ongoing. And since 2012, we've helped shelter 400,000 people, some in the country of Syria that stayed, and some that left and went to places like Lebanon, Iraq, and Turkey. And we built camps in those 3 places. So how do we make decisions? So these are some of the things that our operations people go through to make decisions whether we deploy or not. And all of this stuff is done before they call us and say, we need you to go somewhere. It's really specific. And so I've got an example on the next slide that kind of puts this into a picture. So this is about the Philippines response that we're just now finishing up. They had a huge typhoon there on 16 December, Typhoon Odette. Made landfall on the 16th. Headquarters started working on the response, planning, internal comms, figuring out if this is something we wanted to do. One of the positives is we have a warehouse full of kit in the Philippines, in Cebu. On the 17th, we found out that our staff in the Philippines was safe, which was really important to us. We have a staff of 4 over there. On the 19th to the 20th, they decided we were going to respond, and they're going to deploy SRTs, response team members. So that's 4 days after the event, they've made the decision. It gets messier. The Cebu team that lives there started doing an assessment. They sent in a project plan, said, here's who we're going to serve, here's what we need. And the plan was approved by headquarters on 28 December. They began distribution on the 30th, worked right through the holidays. And then on January 6th, they decided they'd go ahead and do project number 2 because they'd already sent that in. By 22 January, so just a little over a month, we'd already helped shelter 4,800 families in that event. On the 28th of January, our response team members from England finally arrived. We had a really, really hard time getting them into the country because of COVID. And they arrived and went into quarantine for 7 days before they could do anything. Signed with a partner for project 2, which means the SRTs were getting ready to leave. So we worked with a partner, and typically our partner is Habitat for Humanity in the countries. That's who we worked with in Haiti. And 11th of February, we started the distribution of project 2. And at 12 February, 8,000 families had been reached. And I think the end of this week we'll be done with Typhoon Odette, and it'll be 15,000 families served in the Philippines for that event. So that's kind of a timeline of what it looks like for us to something goes boom, for us to get in there and start doing stuff. So everybody knows about Syria. About half of the Syrians have been forced to flee their homes. So as you can see, they're in those countries surrounding Syria. And, you know, it has to be pretty bad in your country when you go to Iraq for security. Another one, this is the Chad, Lake Chad region. So Lake Chad is right there in the center, and it serves all these countries, and it's normally bigger. And so what's happened is, as the lake has started to dry because of the change in our global temperatures, it's dried up and it's causing people to migrate. And then we have some terrorist activity going on the Chad side. So we've been working in that region for quite a while also. So I talked about Rotary. Because we're Rotary partners, most Rotary clubs in disaster areas know who we are, or we already have connections. When we deploy somewhere, one of the first things we do is get on the Rotary app and find officers, usually DGs or past DGs in those districts, and tell them we're coming and here's what we need, and let them know we're coming to help them. Typically, before we land, after 20 hours in the air or whatever, there's emails from somebody. And for me, twice I've had people in the airport holding up signs that said ShelterBox that were sent there by their club leadership. So Rotary is a big, big partner on the ground because Rotary knows what's going on in all these places. I mean, you know, you guys know, leaders in the community. So that's what we need. And they help shorten our supply time. They know how to help us get through customs. They know how to help us find warehouses. Quite often they're warehouses that Rotarians own, so we can get stuff done. They give us young people to help us with interpretation, drivers. We really lean on Rotary to help us get a head start on this so we can make stuff happen. So in the disaster part of the world, that's what we do with Rotary. In this part of the world where it's not really disaster, well, you guys in the US, it's really about raising funds and supporting our missions so we can get stuff done. So this is how we get stuff done. We transport quickly, we figure things out, and we figure out how to get it there. We use a lot of free airtime from airlines. They'll give us space on their flights to get our kit where we need it to go. Last mile, because we're a small group of 2 to 3 people, we can go where large agencies cannot go. So typically, especially if it's a UN-led event where there's a lot of agencies and they're coordinating, we'll go in and look at the map and say, where aren't people being served? What's the end of the supply line? And that's where we'll start and work our way back to the flagpole. A lot of agencies, big agencies start at the flagpole because that's where the media is, that's where the airport is. And we try to look past that and see who's not being served when there's a lot of actors on the ground. And transport by any means. This was my 2016 deployment. This is a boat full of shelter boxes going to A.Bostdorff, which is 6 miles off of Haiti. It's part of Haiti. And A.Bostdorff is Cow Island. The people on that island had just had their homes rebuilt from the last event when that typhoon hit there. So our goals for the next 10 years in ShelterBox are to flatten our donation cycle. Obviously, we get a lot of money when big things go boom, but we need to be able to take care of small things in between. We need to increase our response team population, which, as you saw on my slide, is a really slow process. We want to pre-position thoughtfully. If we take stuff into a country, it's really hard to get it out if we don't use it all. So we're really careful about taking things into different countries if we can't use it all. And then we think differently about shelter. So if you've been to the international convention, you've seen our tents, and you may have seen them at Pets or any other thing. But when we first started, the tent in the top left-hand corner was the only tent we had. And now we've got 3 others. So we got the UN spec tent, that ugly thing in the bottom right. That's used within Syria and in the Lake Chad region because nobody wants to steal that. It's ugly and it's heavy. And it doesn't have any American markings on it. You'll see the other 3 tents have a Rotary emblem, a ShelterBox emblem, and Van Gogh, the people who make the tents for us. In some countries like Syria, that's a Target, so we don't do that. This is our shelter kit. This is a big thing that came out of Typhoon Yolanda. We spent a lot of time in communities where they didn't have enough damage to warrant a tent. And we said to headquarters, we need tarp kits. And we ended up buying tarps on the market in the Philippines for that event, but they weren't great tents. They were great tarps. They're more like FEMA tarps. These are specially made, and this kit cost us $120 to give to families. And part of the reason this kit's so important, many countries, Haiti's one of them, won't let us bring in tents anymore because they don't want the responsibility that comes along with having a tent city. And there are a lot of responsibilities with it, which we don't do. We're not camp coordinators. So this is a great way for us to serve more people. Somebody has a little damage to the roof, tarp. Somebody needs to dig waste lines away from their home. So when the rain keeps coming, the kit will help. We want to think temporary shelter. These are in the Philippines. Again, we've been to the Philippines like 30 times, and we don't want to keep doing the same thing. So we've started working with the partners, and for the cost of a shelter box, which is about $1,200 US, we can build a couple of these. So we're really looking at what is temporary shelter. What can we do to make it sturdier, make it last, make it work a little bit better. We want to rethink recovery. These are kids with school kits in a building that's not a school, and we want to think about how we can help the schools recover in those areas and get the kids back in school. Unfortunately, this is Syria, and these kids will probably not go to school anytime soon. This is a really cool item. This is our school kit. You can't donate for this. There's a group in England that drops some inheritance money into a bank, and it pays for these school kits. And this will run a school for 50 kids. It's got the blackboard paint is really cool. You can pretty much paint them on anything, and it turns it into a blackboard. But this allows teachers to get back in front of their students with supplies and start teaching again. The solar lights that we use, it really makes a difference in the field. It seems like a really small thing, but when you live somewhere there's no electricity and you need to be able to see, or for security for women at night, to provide security, it's a really great thing. This is our debrief process. We do this every night. What do we do well that day? What could we have done better? What do we learn? what do we do different next time? We spend about 40% of our downtime on security and about another 20% doing this. And this leads into security for us. But we are always looking at how we did things and what can we do to improve it the next day. So this has been a real great debrief for us. So you guys really make a difference. This club has been really on the ball in donating to ShelterBox, helping us sustain our mission. And I really, really appreciate it. And I think I'm done with questions. Alicia, did you have something you wanted to read?
Okay. Yeah, actually I did. That last slide really lit into this. Just yesterday, I received in the mail a card from ShelterBox. It has a handwritten note in it, and it says, "Thank you, E-Club of Southeast USA Caribbean. Your gift helped to provide shelter and more for 2,000 households in Haiti." So our box went to Haiti. Our response work, I just got to figure out the writing here. Our response work provided shelter for over 140,000 people worldwide in 2021. Your continued support is much appreciated. And that was kind, which was really good. And then along with that came a letter, and I will go ahead and scan these and put them on the next club meeting, but also got another kind of description of somebody in Haiti. Marcel and his family no longer worry about shelter thanks to Rotary clubs like yours. Marcel, 43, lives with his son Maxo, aged 5, and older sister Julianne Samedi, aka Suzette, 47. Marcel lives in Chantal, about an hour drive from Lacan, Haiti. His community is very rural. To visit him, staff had to wade through 2 rivers in their vehicle until they reached a path inaccessible by car. Staff then walked about through a stream and up a large hill for about 30 minutes. Marcel was working in a plantation field and feeding 2 bulls when the earthquake hit. His bulls were frightened and ran off. First, he ran after the bulls, then he ran home where his older sister had been staying. She had run out of the house as soon as she felt the ground start to shake. He was really frightened when it happened and felt weak, powerless, and as though there was nothing he could do. Luckily, his son wasn't home at the time, and his sister was also uninjured. His home originally had 3 rooms, a bedroom, a living room, and a foyer, along with an outdoor kitchen that remained intact. The house was made of rocks and cement. The main structure of the house remained upright, but the walls collapsed. In the aftermath, he built a makeshift wooden tent next to his home, where the 3 of them slept for about 2 weeks. Once inside the wooden tent, they were safe from the elements and didn't get wet during the storms that followed the earthquake. His initial wooden structure had a roof made of sheet metal. He intends to rebuild the house within the years to come, but he estimates that it may take him about 6 to 7 months to do so. The most useful item in his ShelterBox kit was the tarpaulin, which helped him to secure his original home where the walls had collapsed, and it helped keep his family safe from the elements, especially during hurricane season. The kitchen set also proved useful for his sister to do the cooking, and the solar lamp helped them at night. In the future, he hopes to be able to rebuild his home in a way that will be able to withstand earthquakes and hurricanes, so that he and his family will not have to live through this nightmare again. And that was just presented by ShelterBox and Rotary. So there you go. How fortuitous. I just received that, like I said, this morning in the mail, and had to share. So there you go.
So any questions I can answer?
Hi, it's Andrew. Thank you so much for your service. It's incredible what you do. I think of the Peace Corps and AmeriCorps and everything. It's wonderful. I suppose I'll start off and ask the question. I suppose we maybe are all thinking, with everything happening in Ukraine and 1.7 million people fleeing to other countries like Poland and Mongolia and so forth. Will ShelterBox be helping out those immigrants, refugees in the future? And then obviously, when this war is over and whatever happens and so forth, will you probably be going into Ukraine?
Thanks, Andrew. So the answer to the first part of your question is yes, we had a 4-person team show up in Poland today. Most of them came out of England, one from the US. So they're in Poland now doing an assessment. As you can imagine, with the large population flowing out of the country, it's going to take us a while to get our arms around what we need to do, or if we're even needed. The Polish government and the Polish people are taking people in to their homes, and that's the best thing we can do. As to whether we'll go into Ukraine once this is all over, I don't know. That's a decision for another time based on way too many things above your and my pay grade. But again, back to how we decide where we're going to go. If the government asks us, if their system's broken, which I'm sure the Ukrainian system will be, we'll do what we can. But right now, we're really looking at the countries around there where people are streaming out of, and Poland's a big place. So there's a large U.S. Army contingent there. And now there's a ShelterBox team of 4, and there's going to be a communications team made up of, I don't know who the second person is, but the ShelterBox USA president, Carrie, will be there tomorrow or the next day to start working on comms for that area. But yeah, we're definitely, unfortunately, having to look at that area right now. Poland's where we're going to start.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Andy.
Yeah, I had the same question, but the follow-up would be: have you had requests? We hear in the news everything about Poland. People are going from Lviv. I've had the opportunity to travel around Ukraine many years ago for a week or so, and I'm familiar with some of those places. But have you had requests from the other neighboring countries where we don't hear much about it on the news, but there are refugees fleeing to Hungary, Romania, Moldova? What else is around there? Has ShelterBox received requests for help from those countries?
Yeah, so I can't answer that. Again, this all happens in ops in England. They picked Poland because it's a fairly stable platform. There's the US military's there as part of NATO. So they're starting in one place, and they'll decide if we need to spread out and bring in more people. But right now, they're in the assessment phase. That's typically what Team 1 does. They do the assessment and the logistics setup. So when I went to Haiti last year, that's what I was doing, was logistics, setting up the flights, finding out how much stuff we needed, doing the assessment in Haiti through our partners. So that's kind of what they're doing now. So as far as the other ring countries there, I don't know yet, Andy. It's too soon to know. Suzanne? You're muted. You're muted. Either that or you're a mime.
I don't know. Ah,
There you
okay.
are.
How about this? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mike, I'm told that a lot of German families that still remember being displaced in World War II and later are taking in a lot of people. So there's, room for everybody. And so there's no shelter necessary as long as we're not up to capacity yet. And I'm sure, you'll get to that point, but
Yeah.
yeah.
It's exactly right. As again, in Poland, the people are, taking families into their homes. And Germany just changed their rules for people from the Ukraine to come into their country. They've slacked off on the requirements for them to get in. So that's happening all around that area. So that's what we want to see, because that's much better for those people than to put them in a tent in the wintertime in Poland or any of those other countries. So again, that's all part of the assessment.
I have a completely different question. I
Sure.
understand from ShelterBox, because I've known for it a long time, that in Haiti, these shelter boxes are used for years on end. I mean, they're still there from what, 10 years ago? I mean, they're supposed to last for 3 years as far as I remember. And they are still using them, the old ones.
Yeah, so Haiti is a special case. There's not an infrastructure there, never has been, and it's worse now. As most of you probably know, the president was assassinated just before we went in there. While we were there, we had doctors kidnapped out of hospitals, people kidnapped off the streets. But years ago, after the 2010, after the big earthquake, Haiti came up with a plan to put people back in neighborhoods. And what we did is they set up a line basically of the people in the big camps that we'd set up. And what we did is we came in at the back, however they did their system to start moving families. And we went in the back, the people that were going to be there the longest, and replaced tents for those people. And so we added a bunch of new tents 4 or 5 years after the earthquake. And when I was there in 2016, we put up a few tents for some schools and some hospitals, and people are still in those. I saw tarps from the last time we were there. So the kit that we delivered to Haiti that Alicia just read about was all shelter kits. And we worked with Habitat for Humanity because of the danger in the field there for us. We wanted to make sure that we got the kit to the people. And we wanted to make sure that we weren't putting ourselves in danger to do it. So they did a really nice job. We flew into Haiti for 5 days and did train the trainer with Habitat, did some assessments to validate their assessment that the right people were being seen, and then exited the country right before a riot started at the airport. So we're pretty happy to get out of there.
Dave, quick question. I think you said there were only about 50 of these trained SRTs in the world.
Right.
That's an incredibly low number for the great need. What is the average age and background of a typical SRT?
So at the beginning of COVID, there were 116 of us, and because of the 2 years that we were off, people migrated to other things. We had to do a pretty hefty lift of training to come back on status. So we had to do about 40 hours of basically Zoom type training with different agencies to get our ability back to deploy. We had to be vaccinated, and we had to get our first aid, field first aid redone. And so part of the lift was too heavy for some people, and they probably won't come back. What was the second part of your question?
What's a typical age and background?
So we have SRTs from 72. I think our youngest is 25. There is no typical background within the response team, the SRT community. There's only 2 of us that are ex-military. We don't have a lot of ex-military people for many reasons. It's varied. It's as varied as this screen is right here. A third of our response team members are women. I have deployed with. I had a team lead in Serbia, and she was a pharmacist. I deployed in Malaysia with a guy who was a flower farmer. He ran a big flower farm in England. I know real estate people. So we have a writer. We have I went through my 10-day course with a lady who's a movie producer in Hollywood, lawyers for IBM. So it's pretty varied. And what they're really looking for is can you lead when you have to lead? And when you're not the lead, can you follow and be a supportive leader? So I've been in ShelterBox for 9 years. I'm not a team lead. I don't really want to be one. So I'm not a team lead. So I'm very happy to, be the supporting leader. When there's only 2 of you, it's not like one person's the general and the others are private. You're both pretty much in that together. So it's really a team thing. But Yeah, so there's not really a typical SRT.
Great, great. That was a great presentation. I would like to make that available to every club in our district.
Sure.
Don't we
Yeah.
have the capacity to have it online?
Oh, yeah.
Alicia?
Alicia's already recording it, so
Yeah.
we can make
Yeah.
that recording available. Yeah, great.
Happy to do that.
I'll take care of that. I had one question. You mentioned a country being broken. Can you better define what entails a broken country?
Well, when your country gets hit by a 0.9 earthquake, pretty much everything's going to be broken. Your infrastructure is broken, your medical
Okay.
system, your government's system is broken. So it's really a breakdown of everything, and you don't really have anything to support people in need. One of the examples I use, we've only deployed in the U.S. about 5 or 6 times. It's not very often because the U.S. has FEMA, they have the Red Cross, they have Salvation Army, and a lot of countries don't have that kind. They don't have plans to help their people. Malaysia was really hard for me. We went to an area that's a Malaysian state that's the Muslim state, so they don't have any power in the country. They're the least powerful state in the country, and there's no plan. There's no insurance for your home. There's no plan from the government to help relocate these people. And all we can do is what we can do. And it's painful to, walk away and 2 years later see people, as Suzanne said, still living in our tents. But we do what we can do. Steve, did you have a question? I thought I saw you raise your hand. Okay.
Dave,
Just
can you tell
that-
us what your,
I was just saying, the thing was just that I would love to have you come and speak to our club as well. And I was going to ask Will if he would, send us the recording of this meeting, so I can at least put it on our club website.
Sure. And I'd be happy to do a Zoom for your club. I'm not going to fly to Florida to do it, but
No. But,
So he's actually up in Ohio.
I'm not
Yeah.
flying to Ohio either.
yeah. Oh, yeah, I know
Wait
you
till
really don't wanna
winter,
come
wait
here.
till winter.
Yeah,
You want to
But
see some
we're,
snow? There it is.
there you go. But we're also an e-club, and we have members not only in the US, but around the world. And so, we'll hopefully get this message spread far and wide of what you guys do.
Good. Thank you.
Dave, can you tell us your budget and are you reaching it this year or, what's the story with that?
Off the top of my head, I can't answer that. I can get back to Will with some numbers. I'll have to go look at the financial reports. But are we meeting our budget? Probably not this year. Typically what happens with our budget, as our money goes, that's, we have to make decisions as we go through the year on these smaller events. How much can we spend against how much fundraising is coming in, and what if we have a big Haiti? That's our biggest fear, is another 2010 Haiti or Yolanda type event. In Yolanda, we had 100 SRTs cycle through the Philippines. Okay, that's 2 SRTs. Well, it was about 4 every 3 weeks. We had 100 people cycle through there to put up 7,000 tents. So we, whatever we can raise is what we can do. But I'll get back to Will with some numbers this week. I'll go look at the budget stuff. I've got access to that.
Thank you.
Dave, I think you mentioned that a shelter box is 1,200. I'd always heard 1,000 delivered to.
Yeah, it's somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200.
Okay.
And we used to, back in the old days, we used to, clubs sponsored a box. They didn't buy it. They sponsored a box, and we were so small that we could tell you when that box got deployed and where it went. We can't do that anymore. And typically it's somewhere between a shelter box and something they need. We've gotten very focused on what the country needs, what the people in that country need. For instance, in Syria, none of our normal kit is going into Syria. We're purchasing mattresses, thick plastic sheeting to cover where the windows got blown out, heaters. All of our kit now has soap, water, cleaning stuff because of COVID. So we really look at what the country needs. And it may not be a box, and it may not even be a tent. They might need the tarps like they did in Haiti. So it's gotten real specific, but yeah, it's somewhere between 1,000. I'm sorry, it's 1,200 Canadian. That's why I said that. So it's 1,200 Canadian, 1,000 US.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So, but that's basically pays for the box to be packed, shipped to the country it's going to, and it also pays for the response team member to get there.
And what's the company that makes the tent again?
The company that makes the main tent is Van Gogh. I'm not sure what the name of the company that makes the winterized tent. We have a winterized tent that actually has a heater in it. We've only used it in a couple places. We used it somewhere around Syria and in North Korea. We've been to North Korea 3 times. And we put those tents up in North Korea, and they have a hard bottom. They come on a pallet, so you can't even carry. It's not like we can carry the boxes. So they have a hard bottom. They have a stove and a stove pad to go with it. And the inner lining is like a quilt. And then they have these mattresses, for lack of a better word, that are just bags that are as big as a mattress, and you stuff hay in them for warmth. So different places we get them. The UN tents we get from the UN, nobody wants those. They're ugly, but they come in handy.
What do you use for the heat source in those?
In which ones?
In the heated tent?
The heated tents, you can burn wood, you can burn dung, which is what they
Okay.
normally do in North Korea. It's the only tent we have that has heat in it, because about 85, closer to 90% of our deployments are in the equatorial region, and it's not cold.
Yeah.
Very, very seldom do we go to someplace where it's cold. So that tent doesn't get used very much.
All right.
Said North Korea, then, oops, am I being heard? Yeah, okay. So now you're looking also at politics. Is politics a detriment, or is it just a barrier that gets?
We're apolitical. We're apolitical, and we're non-religious affiliated.
And that
we
gives you free reign. I mean, that gives
Yeah,
you
yeah.
an entry. Yeah.
It keeps us out of trouble. We don't carry guns. We
Sure.
typically aren't with armed security. It happens from time to time. But the way we got into North Korea was from China. A Rotary club in China contacted and said, we have some people in there we need help with. And they actually got our people, no Americans, but Brits could go into North Korea. So it's
I
kind
think
of an odd place.
there's only two Rotary clubs in China. At least there were in 2006. So I don't know,
Yeah.
has that gone up? There are
I
more
don't know.
Rotary clubs in China now?
That'd be good, but I don't know if there are.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Thank you guys for your time. I'll give it back to Alicia.
All right. Thank you. So if there's no other questions, of course, and any other business that anybody would like to talk about, yes, Will.
I just wanted to let folks know that as membership chair, I'm working on between 3 and 4 potential members. So there are some folks that have expressed interest, and we're
And young members.
yeah, and a couple of young members,
Okay.
relatively.
Really? Well, yeah.
So
We will be having, yeah, Suzanne.
I'm the YEO. I'm the YEO. So I'm in charge of those young people. I just ran into, I went to the Gasparilla Art Show. There's a festival, outdoor art show. So I'm sitting there having something to drink, and I have on a Rotary cap, which is always a good idea. And so the girl sitting across from me said, "Oh, I was a Rotary exchange student. I went to Belgium." So I collect these people, and when we get back to recruiting, hopefully this fall, then, we're going to take some of these and say they had a really good experience, and please stay with me because, or send me people, because they are the best people that you can have as an ambassador for a program. So
Yeah, we're recruiting 24/7.
well, so am I, but I mean, I happened to sit out at an art show, and there she was.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And I just want to say thank you for inviting me. And Dave, I'll hopefully be in touch and get you to speak to our club. And Will, if you can send me a
Yeah.
link to this, or Jim Hunt, we'll put it up. I got to go to our board meeting. Thank you so much,
Do it.
folks.
Have fun at the board meeting.
Thanks.
Glad I don't have to do those anymore.
Speaking of board meetings, we will have a very short one, just following the general meeting here. So, and you know, everybody's invited to join in. We are going to go ahead and else we'll go ahead and do the four-way test. I will stop the recording and we will take a couple-minute break and come back on with the BOD meeting. Anything else for the good of the club? No? Okay, great. So, four-way test of things that Rotarians think, say, and do. Is it the
Is it
truth?
the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it
Will it
Rotary
build
friendship.
friendships?
And will be beneficial to all.
To all concerned.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thanks, guys. Quick reminder, our next meeting will be Monday. And look at my face, get my face ID on here. April 4th, and it is our district governor visit.
Okay.
So I don't know. I've got to get in touch with her. See if she's gonna member ID and password that we use and just kind of come into our meeting probably will be the case. But I will of course post that and send out an email, and it is actually already on the time. The timers are already on the district calendar on the day. So there you go. And then we've got Will is working on a speaker from SRAG for either May or June. And then Will has actually got it's either going to be disaster preparedness or UFOs. So we'll talk about
Well,
it.
we might need one of those in a disaster, right?
Yeah, right? It might
uh,
be a combination of both.
Yeah, yeah. I hear people are still waiting to be lifted off the planet. I can't be here usually on Mondays. This is my spring break, so I have shared
Right.
that with you, and so I will see you when I see you. But
Okay,
happily,
well,
hopefully, sometimes in person.
yeah,
Take care.
well, we're happy that you were able to join in, and I know this is not an easy time for everybody. And we can work on that again, but anyway, this seems to
We've
be
always
about
got the recording, Suzanne. You can
Yeah,
always get
we've
the
already-
posted
I
recording.
can't wait to see another meeting. Absolutely.
Yeah. All righty.
No, I get my information. I'm certainly in touch with a lot of people,
Yep,
so
yep.
it's not like I'm missing
and
everything.
keep
But
working on that S4TL student. We've got
yes, no, I'm in touch with the principal, and he says they have an interact club, so this looks very good.
Okay.
So this is just spring break right now, and I don't know what the schools are doing, so we're in a little
Right.
bit of a shift. Yeah,
Well,
but I have.
we've got our application in, and the money's being sent. So
I
there
think
you
you
go.
saw the email. I sent that out
Yeah.
and said, yes, we're working on it. And as I said, it had to go from one school to the next because the one school didn't have anybody, but the second school, which is the school I started youth exchange in this whole area from in our district 6950. We started in St. Pete, and that's where I'm going now. So
Okay,
yeah.
cool. And also, just an FYI, everybody, before we start the general meeting, is our S4TL student, Zaid, is looking at going back and being a registered leader. So I haven't heard any updates on that, but he was working on it, which is something we don't have to pay for, so, which is fine. But I'll let you know.
That's nice to stay involved with the program.
Yeah.
And who he could get into the grill business too, but as you know, that we had a member here whom our money is named for, and he used to be the person cooking. So
Well, there you go.
that's one other way to be involved. All right. Well, thank you again.
Okay, thanks, Suzanne.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, thanks, Dave. All right, well, we'll go ahead and
Thank you.
have everybody have a good evening, and stay online on the meeting threads. Please, join in the discussions. And we'll really actually see each other next month.